All right, welcome to This Explainer. Today we're investigating what is honestly one of the most profound, mind-bending theological paradoxes in ancient texts. We're talking about how an invisible God, enthroned up in heaven, is repeatedly described as a completely visible physical presence walking around right here on earth. We're going to dive deep into the ancient source materials and explore this fascinating pattern within the Hebrew Bible, where Yahweh actually seems to operate in more than one personal mode at the exact same time. So here's our roadmap for the analysis today. We're going to cover 1. The paradox of seeing God. 2. Yahweh visibly on earth. 3. The Genesis 19:24 debate. 4. The angel and the commander. 5. A complex divine unity. And finally, 6. Preparing the way for Yeshua. Section 1. The paradox of seeing God, the ultimate textual tension. Okay. Let's establish the fundamental rule of the Hebrew Bible and the massive mystery it creates for us as readers. Think about it. If God is a singular, transcendent being, enthroned high up in heaven, how do individuals throughout Scripture repeatedly claim to interact with him physically? Seriously, how can Yahweh appear visibly on earth, walking, speaking, and interacting with humans in real-time physical space while remaining the transcendent creator of the universe? It's a huge paradox because biblical monotheism absolutely asserts that Yahweh is absolute and unseen. You have the famous Shema in Deuteronomy 6:4 declaring Yahweh is one. And then you have that incredibly strict biblical warning in Exodus 33 that tells us no man can see me and live. So any physical appearances on earth create a striking textual tension that practically begs for a closer look. We have this invisible, utterly unapproachable God, and yet the texts record real people seeing him and, surprisingly, surviving to tell the tale. Section 2. Yahweh visibly on earth. Analyzing the case studies. Let's actually look at the evidence where this invisible God suddenly becomes highly localized. And to be clear, these aren't just vague ethereal visions, they are concrete, gritty physical encounters. First up, in Genesis 18, Yahweh appears to Abraham at the Oaks of Mamre. Abraham sees 3 men, invites them in, and they literally sit down and eat a meal together. 2 of them eventually leave for Sodom as angels while Yahweh remains there, standing and talking with Abraham. Then in Genesis 32, a man wrestles Jacob all night until dawn, and this man has the physical power to dislocate Jacob's hip with just a mere touch. Finally, in Exodus 24, 70 elders go up Mount Sinai, and the text literally says they saw the God of Israel. They see this brilliant sapphire pavement right under his feet. And amazingly, they sit there eating and drinking in his presence without dropping dead. What's truly wild about this is how Jacob explicitly equates his physical grappling opponent directly with God himself. He names the place Peniel, which literally translates to face of God. He fully recognizes that he just survived a wrestling match that, according to the strict rules of biblical transcendence we just talked about, should have been utterly fatal. Section 3. The Genesis 19:24 debate. 2 loci of action. This brings us to a really specific grammatical mystery that forces us to ask, does the text deliberately portray 2 distinct places of action for Yahweh at the exact same time? This perfectly illustrates the core mystery and the story of Sodom and Gomorrah. We just established that Yahweh was physically standing down on earth talking to Abraham, right? But when the actual destruction happens, the text does something incredibly unusual with its phrasing. If you read it literally, the syntax uses this double nominal construction, which is just a fancy way of saying it repeats the noun instead of using a pronoun like he or himself. It says Yahweh rained fire from Yahweh out of heaven. It doesn't say Yahweh rained fire from himself. It repeats the divine name. This raises a huge textual question. Is Yahweh on earth, the visible interacting agent, calling down fire from Yahweh in heaven, the cosmic transcendent source? Now, we want to be careful and not overstate the case here. So let's look at the scholarly options. Is this just an ancient literary idiom? Some scholars, like John Calvin, argued this is simply a stylistic repetition for emphasis. No big mystery. Others suggest it's agency language, meaning it's an angel acting completely as God's representative. But then you have ancient Jewish interpretations, like the Targums, that suggest a true divine multiplicity. They state that the Memra, the word of the Lord on earth, was calling down fire from the Lord in heaven. As modern scholarship highlights, the academic debate often hinges on whether these texts are presenting Yahweh as a complex, multidimensional unity rather than just a flat singularity. Differentiating between a visible Yahweh and a heavenly Yahweh isn't just a new idea. It was an active part of ancient textual interpretation way before any modern theological debates kicked off. Section 4. The Angel and the Commander. messengers who speak as God. Okay, let's examine another mind-bending pattern in the text where a divine messenger suddenly speaks and acts as God himself. We see this all the time with the angel of the Lord. Across these chronological events, we see a rapid, seamless textual shift. In Exodus 3, the angel of the Lord appears in the burning bush, but then out of nowhere, God calls out from the bush in the first person. In Joshua 5, a man appears as the commander of Yahweh's army, accepts worship, and then the text just casually transitions to calling him Yahweh. We see the exact same blurring of lines with Gideon in Judges 6 and Manoah in Judges 13. The absolutely crucial point here is how the text deliberately blurs the lines between Yahweh's sent messenger and Yahweh's own localized presence. Take Manoah, for instance. He has this whole conversation with the angel of the Lord, watches him ascend in a blazing flame, and immediately panics, telling his wife, "We shall surely die, for we have seen God." The text treats the messenger and the sender as sharing the exact same divine identity. Section 5. A complex divine unity, connecting the Old Testament pattern. So if we synthesize all these puzzle pieces together, what's the total pattern of Scripture regarding Yahweh's identity? How do we reconcile the unseen God with the localized, visible God? The texts, particularly Moses' famous encounter in Exodus 33 and 34, distinguish between a transcendent mode of being that cannot be seen and an immanent presence that safely reveals God to humanity. Moses asks to see God's glory. God replies, "You cannot see my face, but you shall see my back." The text is essentially outlining an internal complexity, a transcendent, unapproachable face up in heaven, and an immanent, accessible presence, or name, that can actually interact with humanity on earth. And later writings explicitly build on this foundation. Psalm 110 envisions David's Lord seated right at Yahweh's right hand, a literal co-regency vision. Zechariah chapters 2 and 3 contain this incredible sender-sent language, where Yahweh of hosts says that he has been sent by Yahweh of hosts. Wrap your head around that. And in Isaiah 6, the prophet sees Yahweh visibly sitting on a throne, filling the temple. The cumulative weight of all this textual evidence really points to a multidimensional unity within Yahweh. Section 6. Preparing the way for Yeshua, the New Testament resolution. So how does this ancient theological framework lay the groundwork for what happens in the New Testament? For readers of the New Testament, these ancient Hebrew categories provide the exact vocabulary used by early Christians to describe Yeshua or Jesus. In the book of John, Yeshua claims this exact mantle. He tells the crowds, "Your father Abraham rejoiced to see my day, and he saw it and was glad." When they question how he could possibly have seen Abraham, he drops this bombshell. Before Abraham was, I am. He is explicitly connecting himself to that visible Yahweh who sat down and ate with Abraham at Mamre, taking the sacred divine name for himself. And the sources note that his listeners immediately picked up stones to stone him. They understood exactly the weight of the claim he was making. Furthermore, John chapter 12 interprets Isaiah's vision of Yahweh on the throne, from Isaiah chapter 6, as a direct vision of Yeshua's glory. According to the sources, the New Testament writers aren't simply inventing some brand new concept of a visible God. Instead, they are deliberately connecting the visible, immanent Yahweh of the ancient texts directly to Yeshua. The massive takeaway from the sources here is that modern scholars and ancient interpreters alike note that differentiating between the transcendent Father in heaven and the visible Son on earth does not violate biblical monotheism. Rather, it reveals its true, complex depth. It relies on a paradigm established all the way back in the earliest pages of Genesis. I want to leave you with a final, provocative thought to ponder based on the profound textual evidence we've explored in this explainer today. Does the Hebrew Bible reveal Yahweh both enthroned in heaven and visibly present on earth? And does this prepare the way for recognizing Yeshua as Yahweh manifested among his people? It is a fascinating question that changes how you read these ancient texts forever. Thank you so much for joining me to explore this incredible topic. Keep analyzing, keep learning, and we'll see you next time.